workspace for doing color separations. I was just, talking with my coworker Billy, who does a lot of the art here, and I was on his machine and just kind of noticed a bunch of palettes all over the place, and it was hard for me to kind of know what was going on or navigate until I just tightened everything up. So I just wanted to show off my setup, and I like to just keep it real simple. Like, one thing I tell a lot of people that are getting into screen printing art is, especially if you don't have experience with Photoshop and Illustrator, it can be a little intimidating because there's really so many different things going on here. Tons of menus, submenus, tools, blah blah blah. But I just say, like, try not to get intimidated by the depth of the program, because ultimately we're just using like a small percentage of what it does. I mean, this thing is really made for like digital and print media designers. Is really the focus of Photoshop. So there's tons and tons of things that we really have no reason to touch unless we want to make something look like it's flying saucers or gargoyles or whatever. It's like we're just doing color separations here, so let's just keep it simple and keep the basic tools. I mean, Photoshop and Illustrator does allow you to create different workspaces for different things, and I've got my screen print workspace sitting right here. So I've just got it down to the bare minimum of what I need for screen printing. And ultimately, if I need to get to something or open a palette, I can do that. It's like, yeah, I never have the properties open, but actually I do have that right there. Sorry, that was a bad example. Yeah, I never have the paths palette open, but if I need to get to it, like, it's one click away, and then I'll use it and then just toss it. It's there's no reason to have like every single palette open at your disposal just so you can use it in a moment's notice. Like, these things we're going to use like 1,000 times a day, and the past palette we'll use once in a month or a year or whatever. I don't know the last time I used the past palette. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to show how I set it up, and it's good to have these things docked. In the modern Photoshops, obviously you can take a palette like this and just, you can see that blue line pop up, just means it wants to dock to that edge. The same way if you've got one of these guys out here, you can see how you can easily dock them together. Likewise with channels, you can just kind of slip them in and they're all just kind of locked into place, which works out well. So I just kind of leave them all be and just do my work as I need to. So at the very basic, let me just, might as well open up some kind of separation here. Alright, so at the very basic, I like to have the info palette open because as separators, we've got channels and we're always concerned about what's going on those channels and reading the values. So so clearly, like, once I mouse over an image and I have a channel selected, I can keep an eye on my K, which stands for black, percentage, to see how much ink is going to go down and what kind of halftone is going to be happening in that area, basically. So info palette is a must, definitely, for separators. I'm very rarely looking down here. In fact, if you double click on these palette tabs here, you can kind of collapse them if you need to. So I typically, the way Photoshop comes by default, layers and channels are kind of in the same palette like this, which I don't like, because ultimately we want to see channels all the time when we're doing separations. And layers, when we're processing the initial art or doing a layer sep or whatever, it's good to see that. But a lot of times when I'm doing the separation, I'm not so concerned with layers because I just flatten that file and pull the colors like a real man does. So so yeah, I can drop the layers down and have like a whole host of channels piled up here for easy viewing. So yeah, this side is pretty simple: layers, channels, and info palette. And then over here, just in case I need to do some special brushing or whatnot, I'll have my brushes there. I'll have my history here. because a lot of times I need to back stuff up when I'm working like on a work file or something like that. So I'll have history available, but not persistently open, basically. Here, properties, if I am kind of processing a client's layered art and we're working with, adjustment layers and effects and whatnot, uh, at that point it's useful to have the properties because, basically if I, let's just make this into an RGB real quick, image mode, RGB, cool. Yeah, so if I put an adjustment layer, like a curves adjustment layer on here, that's when my properties palette comes in useful, basically. But once again, I don't need to see it all the time. And then on my left-hand side, I've just got my toolbar kind of in the skinny mode. You can do this kind of fat or skinny. I like it skinny just because I have a pretty small screen. And that's pretty much it. People use text a lot, but this is kind of like a smart bar up here that is context sensitive. So when I'm using like a type tool or something like that, yeah, my computer's running slow. I'm using a type tool. Obviously I get a type layer, and then this is smart enough to bring up most of the things that I need for type. I mean, if I a lot of times I do want to like play with the kerning or whatever, and in which case you can really quickly just bring up that character palette and have all the options that you're available, all the options available to you. But once again, it just doesn't need to be out here because most of what you need is going to be kind of like in this context sensitive palette. So this is what I recommend, just keeping channels, layers. I see no need for swatches or anything like that here. We've got our swatch libraries at quick access here, so keep it clean and simple. That's all there is to it. And then when you have it, basically say new workspace, name it, and there you have it. You'll be able to quickly pull it up. So that's my Photoshop workspace. I'm going to jump over to Illustrator right quick. Now over here, let's see, let's just get something open. So once again, I try to keep this this workspace fairly simple too. There's not that much that you need to use all the time when it comes to color separations, and so I really just keep it bare to the most important things, and those things are color. Clearly, this is really important for for things that aren't assigned to spot color. Having the swatches palette open is super important to organize your swatches, and I would recommend using the list view. I think this is the view by default, the small swatch, but it doesn't really give you much information on these guys, and ultimately we really want to see the names, and then if something is a true spot color, like let's make this guy a spot color. Boom, we get a little logo right there that shows that it's a spot color, and as screen printers we're all about spot colors. We need all of our vector art to be colored in spots, so that's why I think it's crucial to have this in the small list view. I mean, you can do the large list view, but whatever. All I need is a little swatch, the name, and to know if it's a spot color or whatnot. I also have my layers palette right here. I mean, if I'm working on some like crazy art that's like 1,000 layers deep, I might break this guy out and have him off to the side just so I can manage my layers and whatnot. But for most color separations and working with film files and whatnot, I'm typically only like 5 or less layers on most stuff. So I typically have it down in the corner, and it's the one that's just always open for me. I also like to have my gradient down here since we have to deal with separating gradients fairly often. Transparency is a given since we want to halftone certain things and whatnot. And just as a side note, let me select this same fill color. I'm just going to drop this swatch in here. One thing I often do is select all unused and ditch them. I mean, who needs all those colors in there? And then these are pretty much the swatches that are existing in your artboard right now. So I just made that teal color its own swatch. I'll just call it teal real quick and make it a spot color. So it's so when it comes to dealing with screen print separations, I typically talk people out of using the. I mean, there's instances where this is kind of useful to use this tint slider, but if we kind of zoom in on this object and I pull the tint down, it doesn't do what happens with screen printing. Basically, the tint slider is kind of for paper developers or paper printers because it's assuming that you have a white background behind it. So if I turn the tint of this object down, it's going to tend towards white. When I know in reality, if I print, say, a 34% halftone on top of navy, I'm just going to have a light spattering of teal and mostly navy showing through, not this white thing. So this is not even accurate to screen printing. Instead, we want to use transparency. So if this object is going to be halftone to 30%, I turn down the transparency, and then the background color, aka the garment color, is able to show through. So this is way more realistic to use transparency and not use the swatches tint slider. And the other thing I have down here is strokes, since we need to use strokes to choke in our underbases. So yeah, that's what I have down here. And then up on this side, the same way as I do in Photoshop, I'll have my long skinny toolbar, and I'll just have a couple palettes over here, even though a lot of times these end up showing up in the context. This has this context sensitive bar right here, so if I select two objects, boom, I get my alignment tools so that I can use them, but I also have them over here at quick access. So I'll have my align, my pathfinder, and my transform, since those are all fairly frequently used. I mean, transform isn't used that often. I mean, usually you get the most important parts of transform up here in case you need to resize something to like 5 inches. It can all happen up here, but once again, those are 3 important palettes, so I do have them docked over here. I also have this very little used palette, the attributes, and the only thing I use it for is the overprint fill. And that's a whole different story, but if you don't know about overprint fill, you better ask somebody. And the last thing that I'll have is my actual Pantone swatches. I like this view just because there's so many goddamn swatches. There's so many of them, and I can easily find one, just by typing in the number. And see, it went straight to that swatch. So I just keep it in small swatch view for this. One thing about this is, and this, to be honest, this didn't really work. It was supposed to work in earlier versions, but I could never get it to work. So in earlier versions, whenever you closed out and opened up Illustrator again, even if you saved your workspace, see, this has the same thing as Photoshop, where I can say new workspace, name it, and then I can bring that up at any time. So like in the past, when you closed out of Illustrator and opened it up again, your swatch palette would disappear, and the way that you were supposed to be able to prevent that was to set it to be persistent. I don't know if maybe some other people figured out how to get it to work in the past, but it would always drop off, persistent or not. But it seems that in CS6 and who knows above, I'm just sticking with 6 for now, but I set it to persistent, and that swatch stays along with my workspace. So that's pretty much all there is to my workspace for Illustrator and Photoshop. Keep it simple, just down to the basics. If